Welcome back to another live edition of the First In Cam podcast alongside my co-host Evan. We are here to discuss our Week 10 bets. We have a bunch of bets today, that I think that we're going to hit. I just put a TikTok of a 3-team parlay, so if you're looking at TikTok and get some information from there, go ahead and look up First In Cam, give us a like, give us a follow, and share our stuff and bring our page to the top. Still trying to get this YouTube thing rolling. I think we're doing a good job with the presentation of everything and kind of getting things going. So let's dive in to these bets. You sent me a list of games that you're looking at. Let's start with one of the bigger marquee games in Texas and Vanderbilt. I was looking at some of the information on this game, and Arch Manning is still dealing with a concussion, which is unfortunate. I think that he has a chance to play. The biggest thing about this game for me is really is Arch Manning. Matthew Caldwell, the transfer from Troy, could get his first start. I think it's unlikely that Arch Manning at least doesn't start this game. But it's intriguing to me because Vanderbilt, who's been playing on national TV and been in the marquee spot for weeks now, and Texas is favored in this game by 3 points. I'm not shocked by it, but I do think Vanderbilt is good enough to handle 3-4 tough games in a row while being on the road. Give me your thoughts and opinions on this 2.5 point spread and why you think it's there.
I think it's 2.5 because of a couple of reasons. One, I think there's a big dynamics issue for Vanderbilt specifically. They played Alabama, had a bye, and then they have had two home games back to back, LSU and then Mizzou, just this past weekend. I think the Mizzou game was, I think, a bit of a glimpse at what would be this Texas game, except Texas has a better defense and I think more capability to score on offense. And so I would have thought after last week that Vandy would be favored this game, and I bet if we were to look at those lines, it probably would have been that way. I think the Mizzou game kind of opened some eyes to,
Yes.
okay, we know what this team probably can be, and so we need to make sure that, or we need to keep this line a little bit closer. Texas, I think, gets the edge just because they played a lot better in that Mississippi State game. Kind of a funky one, but Arch ended up having 350 yards, played pretty efficient, had one turnover. That Texas really got outplayed and somehow came back and won that game. But to me, this feels like Vandy has to go on the road for the first time in 2 weeks. They're playing against probably the second best defense they've seen since LSU, but they have to do it on the road, and they have to do it against a Texas team that's very desperate. Like this is a Texas loses, they're out of the playoff picture for good, and so this feels like a team for Texas where you might see a couple trick plays early, you might see a couple rhythm plays, you might see a couple deep shots early on, and try to get Vanderbilt in a position where they have to play from behind. This is very difficult to ground and pound and squeeze out 8, 9 minute drives when you're down two scores, even if it is just 10 points. And so to me, it feels like this is a Texas game. We could see, like, if Arch plays the best version of Arch, and if the backup plays maybe the best version of this offense we've seen so far this season. So, in my opinion, I do think Texas is the better roster, the better team. Probably playing, maybe peaking a little bit later in the season. I must have been expecting that. But when it comes to Vanderbilt, I think this is a bad dynamics game for them. And I think that after three grueling games in a row, this one just feels like where the lighting breaks. We could see, Diego Pavia not play his best. Defense gives up a few scores. Now it's 31-17. And it's really not all that competitive.
Honestly, I don't even think that Texas is going to be able to score that many points. And this looks like one of those games for Vanderbilt. You've had a couple games in a row that you've mentioned against really physical teams, and then now you're on the road against a Texas team that seems to be playing their better football in the later half of the season. At least that's what you would expect. I don't know if Vanderbilt is one of those teams that's going to fall into the trap. Now, we see a lot of time that happens this year, or that happens multiple years in the past, where a team starts off really hot and then they get to the true kind of conference gauntlet of their schedule, and then things kind of start to fall off a little bit. I don't think that Diego Pavia lets his team look past this game. I know it's Texas, so you're not necessarily looking past it, but the 2.5 line to me is I think it's Vegas betting on the fact that these are college kids going on the road, and weeks have just gone by, and they're going to have to lose again at some point. Vanderbilt obviously not projected to be a one-loss team this season. 2 losses keeps them in, but I do like the fact that this is a back against the wall game, and you never know how that team is going to play. To me personally, I think that any team that has their back against the wall, they're going to be playing with nothing to lose. And I think that could be the best case scenario for somebody like Arch Manning, where he goes into a game and he just has to go out and play. You're not worried about next week. You're not worried about what happened last week. It's this game. You're just trying to get to 1-0. And I'd be surprised if Vanderbilt jumped out to an early lead, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game is 17-10 at halftime. I just don't know if Texas can score enough against Vanderbilt. I don't think Texas can score enough against anybody worth a damn in the SEC. And for that, I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to take Vanderbilt to cover the spread and win. I just don't see a case where Texas all of a sudden finds it on offense. Their defense might give Vanderbilt some fits a little bit, but I don't see Texas offense clicking right now, and the receivers are getting there. Wingo had a good game last week, but he needs to be consistent for me to actually believe in this offense, and for right now, I really just don't.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that you could look at Texas's schedule and say
Mm-hmm.
they've been basically one, two, three, four. This will be their fifth game in a row, no bye, and then they have a bye week after this game. Then they go to Georgia. So you could say that this could be a bad schedule spot for Texas as well. They're probably the second most rested team here. I happen to think that when you talk about college kids, we're trying to predict scores, trying to predict who's going to win, who's going to play well. You just like you're going to get a floor game from one of these teams, and we've seen what Texas's floor is. And in my opinion, that Kentucky game was it.
Yeah.
That was the worst they're going to play. Mississippi State game was kind of a trap for them as well. They got in a hole, they dug themselves out. I think Texas is ascending. I happen to think Vanderbilt's playing worse and worse football. You've seen what they did against LSU, and I think that was like a Super Bowl for Vanderbilt. I just felt like
Hmm.
all was on the line. If they were going to have a special season, they could take advantage of a wounded offense and a decent defense, and they did. And then Mizzou comes to town, and that game was all the hype, and we got 17 points, and 7 of those points came off a massive run, which Texas probably doesn't give up at the same rate that a Mizzou defense would. And I think Texas can score the ball more than Mizzou can. Like if Mizzou played the same schedule Texas did, and Texas played the same schedule Mizzou did, I think we'd be higher of Arch at this point, based on the number of reps he would have gotten, also playing
I
that
can
season.
agree with that. I can agree
So
with that. Yeah.
I don't look at this game as Vanderbilt's going to run away with it. I don't think either team will. I just happen to think Texas has more athletes, and I also look at them and think this is a team on Texas that they just have Georgia left, and Texas A&M, I guess, where they could like really make a run here. And so they're a scary football team if they can click on offense. I'm gonna lean Texas figures it out. I'm gonna take them and lay the 2.5 points.
That's a good take. I mean, you could be very right, and I could be very very wrong about Vanderbilt at this point of the season. I think they're primed for an SEC championship game appearance, and then what happens there is just fate to me. I'm my questions about this Texas team go far beyond just Sarkeesian and Arch Manning. Their trenches look okay, but not how we would think Texas looked. Maybe it's just my eyes watching Texas the last couple of seasons making it to the college football playoff semifinals and what those teams look like. It just seems like the offense is missing that special piece. And I think it might just be at receiver. This could pay out in the long run with these younger guys next season, the season after that, where all those guys are upperclassmen and have experience. But as of right now, I'm gonna stick with my prediction of Vanderbilt minus or plus 2.5, and I think they do win, and I think they do win by more than 3 or 4 points, and that's just my opinion.
I don't mind that at all. I have this spreadsheet of offensive efficiency.
Hmm.
Let me pull up Vanderbilt and just kind of walk you through it. So when we look at offensive points per possession, Vanderbilt actually ranks in this category as second in the country on offensive points per possession at 3.78 points every time they touch the football they possess it, which is crazy. However, they are not a high flying offense. This is a team that typically gets the football and they score with it. But how they score is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 play drives. And
Hmm.
that's very difficult to do consistently. It's very difficult to do on the road. It's very difficult to do against a really good defense. And for all we know, Texas could be the best defense in the country, maybe behind LSU, maybe they're better than LSU. I'm not really sure just yet. and so they held Ohio State to 14 points. So like if we look at it that way, I think there's some room. Now, if we look at Texas and where they rank on this little sheet, they're actually way down the list at 69th, averaging
Hmm.
2.25 points per possession. But they typically go a little bit faster. So I guess if you are going to win this bet, it would be because Vanderbilt possesses the football, and we're talking about Texas having three possessions, four possessions in the half, when you'd expect to have 11 total possessions throughout the game. And so if it's a first half churn, Vanderbilt can get the lead and then just kind of sit on the ball, kick a field goal, and they're up 10. That could be insurmountable if Texas gets the ball second half, three and out or six and out, and then Vandy gets the ball again. And it's like, okay, third quarter is basically over. So you got the ball six times in the game, maybe a couple junk positions at the very end, makes it eight. So this could be a very much a Vanderbilt. We get the ball, squeeze the clock, and you don't get to do a whole heck of a lot with it. I just happen to think Texas is going to come out and, in a weird way, like spoil Vanderbilt's season, which is not something I ever thought I would say. Texas would have to spoil a Vanderbilt season.
Yeah, you make a good point. Um, let's head up over to the next game, Oklahoma versus Tennessee, where this is one of the more interesting matchups to me because a couple of weeks ago I would have told you Tennessee should be favored by way more than 3.5 points. And then Matera comes back. It doesn't look as great as he did in the beginning of the season. And you get an injury to your throwing hand. That's what's supposed to happen. But then Tennessee is kind of a question mark to me because their offense is high flying. They're averaging over 50 points a game, and their defense is kind of reverting back to what a Tennessee defense usually looks like. And I think they're in a weird spot right now where I feel like their team already peaked. We talk about teams peaking at the right time. I think that team has kind of already peaked, and I feel like they kind of peaked against Georgia in a way where they played their best ball that they possibly could play, and it just still wasn't enough. A little fluke missed field goal, sure they could have won that game right there. But I feel like that momentum that could have been carried into what would have been a top five, top seven Tennessee team, they're now sitting on outside of the top 10, and they don't have the right momentum. It's just kind of a feeling that I'm getting watching them is that Oklahoma has the good enough defense to where they could really spoil this game. I think Oklahoma's playoff chances are out of the window at this point. And I think all they really left to do is be one of those teams that's going to spoil a season. So give me your take on this game because it's a really interesting one. And I really am I'm happy Tennessee's at home because if this game was at Oklahoma, then I think that this line would probably be switched.
So I disagree.
Mm.
I think Tennessee's the better football team. And are they playing better football? I'm not 100% sure. I just don't think Oklahoma's playing the best football they could be. And at one point, we felt like Oklahoma had an incredible defense, and that offense was pretty good. At one point, they had the Heisman front runner at the helm, and so you kind of felt like this could be their year. And after watching Ole Miss get whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, with what I thought Ole Miss has is a not so great offensive line, a running game that's just okay. Kimo Lacey had one big run. He had 79 yards against Oklahoma. And then Oklahoma got some points on offense, but the Ole Miss defense was just okay, and they didn't take advantage of it. And so I look at this game and think Tennessee can probably get after this Oklahoma secondary, which was very apparent that Trinidad Chandler could take advantage of. I think Joey Aguilar at home could be very aggressive with this defense. I think you look at some of the best, one of the better receiving corps in the country being Tennessee. I want to go back to points per possession because this game kind of speaks to where I think this game goes. And this is one of my best bets of the week. And if I was going to parlay one of my best bets of the week, this is exactly what it would be. I would take Tennessee to cover that 3.5 point spread. I think Tennessee gets the lead and they continuously run. Tennessee right now has the 14th ranked offensive points per possession offense, I guess you could say, at 3.32 points per possession. So they are scoring the ball at lightning pace. You said they lead the league in score, or lead the country in scoring. They run such a fast pace, they're going to get multiple possessions. Oklahoma's defense, I don't believe, is all that good after seeing what Ole Miss did. Now, Oklahoma on the other side, they score about 2.24 points per possession, and that puts them somewhere in like the 30s, I think it is. And they're a very good offense too. So I would also take the over of 56 and a half points on this game. I think Tennessee to cover. I think their offense can just score more points. I would take Oklahoma to score some points as well. just not enough. So I think this game's going to end up being like a 38-31, really competitive game. But 56.5 as the over/under. I'm going to take the over on that. I think we should see a total of about 60 points scored. So I believe in Tennessee and their scoring ability. I don't believe as much in that Oklahoma defense as I thought I once did. And so I think both of those things kind of give way, and we see a ton of scoring, and I think Tennessee scores a few more times.
I can agree with that. I don't think Oklahoma they don't play the time of possession game the best, and so to stop Tennessee's offense, I simply just don't think that that's gonna happen. And I'm not saying that Tennessee is about to go up and score 45 points, 50 points, but they're Oklahoma's not stopping them from scoring 31 and 34. So if Oklahoma can keep up with that, then good luck. I'm not necessarily sure. They don't really have a run game this year. Mateer's not really running around defenses like he was at Washington State, and so I think Joey Aguilar is going to have a good time. If Tennessee can handle this pass rush from Oklahoma, then I don't see a situation where Tennessee doesn't cover this game. The over on the points, I would bet that was probably going to hit more than anything else on this game. I could see a game-winning field goal situation where you only hit the 3 and not the 3.5, but give me Tennessee minus 3.5. I think Joey Aguilar throws for about 300 yards against his defense. If he could turn the ball over maybe just once, because if he turns the ball over twice, especially if you're going down driving in the red zone turnovers are killer. We've seen that kill multiple teams this season. So I'm going to take Tennessee minus 3.5, but I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma kept this close heading into the fourth quarter for sure. So let's head over to USC versus Nebraska. That is one of my more interesting games as well. I have not been high on USC this year. I've come around to Dylan Raiola and Nebraska being kind of just a legit Big Ten team, not a national title contender, but a team that you can't just look over in the Big Ten on a random Saturday. USC gets the edge at 6.5, but this is a game where I think that Nebraska easily covers, and that's what I'm going to take.
Okay, and so this game is tricky to me because I don't think you're wrong at all. If I just look at the dynamics, I think Nebraska could be the more physical team. However, I watched USC be the more physical team against Michigan, and I watched Michigan be a much more physical team to Nebraska.
Against Nebraska.
The only thing that makes me a little concerned about this game, though, is it's going to be somewhat cold, and that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot unless you're talking about a team that's based in Los Angeles. And so maybe like 40-something degrees. I'm not exactly sure when kickoff is for this game, but it will be a little bit chilly. And so I look at that along with an offense that is actually pretty good, but how physical can you be if you're uncomfortable and you're on the road? 6.5 points is a lot. I happen to think Jade Miles is the better quarterback in this matchup, and I know you would agree with that as well. You put him way higher on your top 10 quarterback list than I did, and he's climbing up mine rapidly. I could see Lincoln Riley pulling a big one out of this. I'm probably going to go ahead and take USC minus 6.5. There's something about this Nebraska team that just feels defeated. I don't know if it's that rule potentially like going to.
I think that has something to do with it. I was going to bring that up. It definitely is a distraction.
It might just be that they're not as good as people expect. I think that Michigan game, very similar to how Penn State was with Oregon. It was like, if we're going to be the program that turns it around and this is going to be our year, we have to beat Michigan. They did. They got outclassed by Michigan pretty easily. Same thing Penn State. It's going to be our year. We're going to beat Oregon. They didn't. And so maybe that just takes some of the air out of the room. But that place is going to be a crazy environment. We've seen USC on the road. They lost a team that wasn't better than them in Illinois. And so it would not be a stretch to think that USC could walk in there and just hand Nebraska a game, and Nebraska could take one that they probably don't deserve. And honestly, they're almost right there in the playoff picture. So I'm going to lean USC to cover, but I am going to take the under on this game, which is actually higher than the Oklahoma-Tennessee
Wow.
game at 50. This game's at 59.5. So I'm going to take the under on this game. I just don't think Nebraska gets it done in any way.
Right. And I will say about a certain matchup, Emmett Johnson, who is the Big Ten's leading yards from scrimmage. I think this is a game where USC faces the best running back that they've played all season. And I think after playing an elite quarterback, I think the hardest thing for college football teams to do is play against an elite running back who has real NFL ability that can kind of just break open a game with one play. And that's really all it takes for one of these running backs is you give them just one opportunity to go for 40, 50 yards plus, and the game is totally changed. And with the play action passing that Nebraska does, you like Dylan Raiola because he's in a pro style offense, something that USC isn't going to see probably the rest of the season too. It just feels more like a trap game for USC. They get the touchdown favorite. This game, like you said, the weather conditions could be ugly, could be iffy. We're talking about a game that could be 10-7 at halftime, could be 14-13. One of those games. I don't think it's personally going to hit the over on the points. I think USC would need to be playing somebody that isn't going to try to control the time of possession as much. And then Dylan Raiola being a sophomore, playing on a stage like this, I want to see him prove. I mean, I'm not going to do it by himself because you can in football, but I want to see him go toe to toe with Maava. And Maava's been getting a lot of love recently. You just said that he's kind of climbing up on your boards. He's kind of been an early guy for me to watch out for. He probably wasn't in my top five going into the season, but he's definitely there now. I want to see Dylan Raiola really compete and challenge Maava for being the best QB on the field because I think he has the potential. For some reason, I just by the week I like what I see from him more and more. Seems like one of those guys. We talk about it in basketball all the time because of spacing and different rules and stuff. That there's certain guys that are just meant for the NBA and they're gonna perform better than they did in college. And I think Dylan Raiola is kind of that way where he's gonna get to the NFL and we're gonna be like, oh, this is why he was a number one kid coming out, or oh, this is why he's impersonating Patrick Mahomes because he really does have that same ability. I don't think he has the same ability now, but the way that he can throw the ball at different angles, he's he's quicker than faster, but he's not a stiff in the pocket. And Maava's kind of the same way. He's probably has a little bit underrated athleticism too. I just want to see Nebraska put it together for 4 quarters. The game against Michigan was super disappointing in the fact that I think Julian Sayin not only outperformed Raiola, but everything else just looked so easy for, or not John Julian Sayin, but Bryce Underwood. Sorry, Bryce Underwood looked like the better quarterback on the field, and that was a surprise to me. And I think that was a game that was supposed to put kind of Bryce Underwood over that hedge and continue a hot streak. They've kind of simmered down a little bit and lost some games. But to me, Nebraska is not a team that you can kind of just say, whatever, we're just going to roll into Nebraska in that stadium and win. So I'm going to take the Nebraska cover on this one. I don't expect them to win, but I do expect that game to be closer than 7 points.
Well, what I think is fast, there's so many pieces to this game because, first off, I think Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane are going to be the two best receivers on the field. They both happen to be on USC's roster. So I look at that as the opportunity for Jay Malva to really outperform Dylan Raiola. But somehow Dylan Raiola ended up with like 300 passing yards against Michigan. So if he'll get the job done too, I happen to think that Lincoln Riley needs this game. And if it wasn't for all the firings, Matt Rule would need this game desperately too. Like, this is a team where he has not played a very good schedule. I don't. Let me run off these names because it really is unimpressive. They barely beat Cincinnati, Akron, uh, HCU. I don't even know who that is. Uh,
That's an FBS or FCS school. Yeah.
they played, lost to Michigan, beat Michigan State, played Maryland, Minnesota, got blasted by Minnesota, and then they kind of snuck by Northwestern. So they haven't played a gauntlet of a schedule at all. They avoided, I think, the big three, at least Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. They avoided all of that, and somehow this is a team that's not super competitive. And you're kind of sitting there thinking like, Matt Rule, this is supposed to be year three. This is your time. It just so happens that there are so many coaching vacancies that a team could just pluck him, pay him more money, and he could be out of there. And so he's not on hot seat talks because he might leave his seat, which is unfortunate for the fan base. But he hasn't performed at the level I thought he would. Lincoln Riley said last year, we're going to turn the corner. We're going to be more physical. We're going to be the better team. We're going to be better in the trenches. And they kind of have been. Gave one away to Illinois. But he needs this game too. It's like this feels like two coaches who have promised their fan bases a specific result. And this is the game where it's like, okay, one of you has to lose. So who's going to impose their will more? I think Lincoln Riley and this team is going to come out and be very aggressive against Nebraska. And that ends up them covering that 7 points. I think this is a team for Nebraska that could maybe see them do a Florida State where they kind of just mail it in. Guys are thinking about transfer and the coach is going to leave. Like, we're not all the way bought in. I'm sending my film out, like, whatever it needs to. So
Yeah.
I look at this like USC can be the more focused team, and they take this momentum and carry it through the end of the season, carry that into another really good recruiting class, which they're already building. And next year, we're talking about them being maybe the big four in the Big Ten. It's no longer Penn State. They'll take a year or two. It'll be Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, USC.
That's a good point. I've been waiting for USC to kind of jump back into that upper tier in the Big Ten since they've joined. Hasn't Yeah, it hasn't really been that way. So you get Penn State out of the way, and then you're kind of waiting on the next team to kind of jump up. And if we look around the Big Ten, it really is only USC to take that spot. It's not Minnesota. It's not going to be Iowa. We probably wish it was Iowa, but it's not ever going to be. And then Maryland, they got a freshman quarterback. We'll see what happens with him. He probably ends up in the transfer portal if I had to bet on that. And then looking everywhere else, it's just really not going to, definitely not a UCLA. That was one of those picks that you had that I was hoping would come out and be at least competitive for the first quarter, first half, and that was over after the first quarter. So Lincoln Riley is one of those guys too, where I look at, okay, his recruiting classes are always going to be in the upper echelon of the recruiting class, the top 25. He'll probably usually have a top 10 recruiting class because LA football is just getting even better. But I wonder what his mind is like right now with all these vacancies back open. And I'm sure he's gotten some calls. He's kind of kept it under wraps for the best that he can. I haven't really seen any reports about him taking any calls about another school. I don't know exactly know what his buyout is at USC. I'd have to look it up, but it seems like, well, at least for what I would say is that he is one of those coaches that's kind of not on a hot seat per se because of losing, but there's a chance that he could take a better job. And it sounds crazy saying that there's a better job out there than USC, considering what is open. I don't think I could see him at a Florida or a Florida State even when Norvell leaves. But if you're talking about going back to the Midwest, going back to somewhere in Texas, if Sarkisian decides to do whatever, that could be one of those situations that opens up for him. USC is just one of those teams that's hard to predict because they go to Illinois and lose. And you look at that Illinois team, and it's like they were top 10, and now they're not even a thought anymore in the Big Ten as far as being a threat. So that game always kind of sits in the back of my head like, okay, that could be USC's floor, and that would be their best case scenario would be, that's the worst football that they play all season. But I don't know, something about this Nebraska game, this part of the season, November 1st, wicked things start happening in November. And in college football, we know we've been watching it our whole lives that there's certain teams or certain games that just feel like a trap. We'll get to another game in a moment that feels like an even bigger trap. But for right now, I'm going to stick with my Nebraska covering this USC game.
I don't mind that. Just to touch on the Lincoln Riley recruiting class, he currently has the number one recruiting class for 2026. One 5-star, he has 21 4-stars, and he has 13 3-stars. He is currently number one. Georgia is number two, Bama 3, Notre Dame is 4, Texas A&M is 5. So we'll see kind of where that shifts before the year is over. But as of right now, he has a number one recruiting class. And so it feels like they're building and ascending something there. This could be one of those games where if they win, they take the leap. I'm looking at USC's schedule, and Nebraska here, they host Northwestern. Luckily, they host Northwestern and they host Iowa.
Mm.
All the games are at home. Then they go to Oregon, which will be its own game, which we'll have to see what Dan Lanning's team's really made of. They might beat the brakes off USC. Then they host UCLA. So, in my opinion, worst case scenario, this is a one more loss football team. If they can get by Nebraska, Iowa would be tricky. But looking at a 3-loss football team, that's exactly where Lincoln Riley should be. 4 losses, it'd be like, okay, we're kind of spinning our wheels. But I think he's in a good spot. We can move on to the next game, but I like where Lincoln Riley and this team is heading, and I like their recruiting class. They're definitely building something. It's just taking an extra year longer than fan base wanted.
Well, let's talk about another a game that I was talking about. The spread might seem a little wicked, and the spread is 20.5 for Ohio State over Penn State. This line, beginning of the season, a month and a half ago, there's no way this line would have I think, crossed 5 points, and then Penn State loses 3 games in a row. They don't look great. Drew Aller's out. Coach is fired. Ohio State looks like the best, not only the best assembled team in the country, but the best coach. Brian Hartline is now fielding calls about a head coaching job. So there's a lot swirling around that situation, but I think that this team is good enough to where the distractions don't necessarily seep in and get guys unfocused, because we're talking about a team who not only did just win a national championship, but they are the front runners to win one again. And everybody is focused on that. And when that's a real possibility, I don't think that you get guys that are confused or wanting to hit the portal as fast, because once you hit the portal, you're not a part of any of the playoff games. And so I think that's a big thing for a lot of these players, and big thing for coaches maintaining these players is that, hey, we're going to compete for something bigger than you. And doing that gives you a better chance than doing anything else. Penn State, on the other hand, I mean, what are they playing for the rest of this year? I guess their pride and their dignity. This game being at Ohio State, I think if this game was at Penn State, I would probably take this line only because Penn State would probably be playing inspired football at home under an interim head coach. The head coaching search has just been kind of looming over the team. Like, oh, what are we going to do? Are we going to bring a guy in at any point? Do these coaches want this job? Are we going to get an elite guy? Because we're seeing these spots open up, and you're seeing Penn State fall down the list as these jobs open up. And to me, I've been saying this for a while, that I don't think Penn State is in that upper tier of coaching jobs. It might seem like it. They definitely have been playing like it, but as far as if you just put them on an isolated island by themselves, I don't necessarily think that they match up with the Ohio States, the Miamis, the Floridas, and not even just talking Big Ten, but just around the country. I don't think it's a better job than USC. So give me your thoughts on this Ohio State game, and what do you expect to see? Because a lot of people around the country that do a lot of betting expect Penn State to cover this line. I just don't think it's possible.
I agree. I don't think the offense can actually score enough points, and I don't think the defense can be on the field as long as they're going to need to be and be as consistent. Like they have their own injuries. They have guys who are checked out. That's for sure, to say the least. Interim coach, I can see the offense doing something, but Drew Aller isn't back there at quarterback; it's a backup. And so, like you're looking at a team that I'm not sure can muster up enough points. What I will also say is Ryan Day is off a bye, and you got this game way back when they bye week went to Washington, and you took Washington to cover, and the second half was just a splatter. Same thing I think is going to happen here. I happen to think Ohio State off a bye is not overlooking this game. They're fully aware. Jim Knowles, the old DC of Ohio State, is at Penn State, and I think they know how to beat that defense. I think Matt Patricia's going to have a ridiculous game plan for the backup quarterback of Penn State, and I just don't see the offense having to press the issue much, having the better athletes, having the better scheme, having the better camaraderie is the wrong word. They're gelling. They've got more experience together. Like I just don't know that Penn State can score 10
A
points.
backup QB going against Ohio State defense sounds like the absolute worst possible thing. I mean, if you think Arch Manning played bad in his first game against that defense, with the kid's name Hunkmeyer, I forget the kid's first name, but he's gonna struggle. He only threw for what 90 something, 93 yards against Iowa, and I mean, and yeah, 28 attempts, and so you throw him for 93 yards. That's not cutting it against Ohio State. Patricia is gonna blitz him until that kid is seeing ghosts out there, and I mean, if you're talking about any team, anytime TD parlay, if people are interested in those, you might be able to catch an Ohio State defense pick six early in this first quarter with one of those. I just think it's going to be one of those games where you might flip it on. Okay, Ohio State might hit a field goal on their first possession. They may not score, kind of disappointing, whatever. Penn State punts, you turn the game off, you look back, and it's 17-0 and late in the first quarter, and you're like, well, there goes that spread. And so if Penn State gets down early to an Ohio State team, I think you could forget about it. If that game gets out of reach within 14 points in that first quarter, or even in the first half, really, then I think Ohio State wins. I think Ohio State wins by 28. If this line was at 27.5, I would have taken it. That's just my thing on it. I don't see anybody stopping Jeremiah Smith. I don't see Julian Sayin slowing down at all as the most efficient and accurate quarterback in the country right now. Cornell Tate had that huge catch last week, and it just their offense just looks more and more complete. Bo Jackson, the freshman running back, anytime TD parlay, put it on him. They have it all, and Arvell Reese, who has kind of been a superstar on their defense, he's kind of like overshadowed what Caleb Downs has been doing as far as what people like seeing on social media, projecting him as this edge rusher, outside linebacker in the NFL. I think he's a very interesting prospect to watch. So there's just a lot of stuff going on for Ohio State that I really like. Obviously, Ryan Day's record off of a bye. You've talked about that in past episodes, that it's pretty much immaculate at this point. So them preparing for this game, they don't look past it. I think they're still looking at Penn State as, Penn State's upset us before in the past. They can very well do it again, and I think they're locked in, and I think they cover this game pretty easily.
I think there's one thing that could add to the competitive character of this Ohio State team this week is the amount of people that have not jumped ship, but have given their focus to Indiana,
Yeah.
and how just thoroughly impressive they were against UCLA and against the vet that I called out. And just how good that team is. I think that when you start to hear like yeah, we think you guys are really good, but this other team is also really good too. And it would not surprise me if Ryan Day came out and absolutely torched Penn State. And it was 28-0 going into the half. Like I just would not be shocked at all. I think I think it's that, and people even considering Texas A&M being anywhere near this Ohio State team. Something about it just screams we have something to prove, and it's not. Penn State just happens to be the team who's in front of us right now. I don't know that it's got anything more than that to do with it. Penn State doesn't have a head coach, have a quarterback. I think Ohio State's out for blood. This could be easily 28 to 35-0. I think Brian Hartline is kind of on a tryout too. Like people are going to look
Yeah.
at him and say, okay, are you focused? Like, how can you handle success? You're a first-time OC, which is crazy that he's putting up these numbers. They have the best roster in the country, but I happen to think that there is some space here for this team to put up 45, 50 points and have maybe their second highest scoring game this season outside of that Grambling game where they put up 70. So I would look out for this over. I like it a lot. I would take also Ohio State to cover this game.
Good point about Heartline. I hate the coaches with the distractions. I think it is a real thing because you're talking about a guy changing his whole livelihood and then having to change how he does everything as far as recruiting, his travel, his family, his kids, what they got going on. There's just a whole change that happens when you start to focus on what is my life like after this season. And it's easy for people to get comfortable at Ohio State. I mean, you're the front runner for a national title game. You pretty much have locked up a playoff spot at this point. You could probably drop 2 games at this point if you wanted and still be fine. So that doesn't make me as nervous. It's definitely just kind of a talking point, but I think that Ohio State covers this game, and they do it pretty early, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Here's my question to you about the coaching, shifts and changes. Do you think Brian Hartline would be a guy? Not that he's not distracted because anybody can be distracted, but do you think he's a guy that would potentially like leave before a playoff run? Like, let's say they beat I don't know Oregon or Indiana, if I be Indiana in the Big Ten championship. Does he leave the team as the OC and go take the Penn State job right after that before the playoff? Or do you think he stays and tries to win a national championship? Like, how do you foresee that coaching, I guess, jumble happen? I can see if they lose and get upset, he's out of there, no problem. But do you think he really would leave early, like we have seen some coaches do, and not participate with a team in the playoffs? Like, is that possible?
I think it is, and I think if you would have asked people this, 3 or 4 weeks ago, you'd be like, no way, you're about to compete for a national title. You can't. Well, 1, they won last year. 2, we've seen these jobs open up at a fast rate. And so what that means that they're also going to close at a fast rate. The window for these jobs being open is not going to be huge. You've seen the report today, Coach Franklin from Penn State, it looks like he might be a done deal at Virginia Tech. So once he goes, that Penn State job obviously is wide open. If he doesn't take the Florida job, doesn't take Arkansas, is not taking these other schools, then that means those schools are wide open for a guy that now you're talking about their secondary choice. And Hartline doesn't really have anything. He doesn't really have any leverage in this situation other than the fact that he was the OC of one of the best offenses in the country. That's great, but the head coaching position, it's about everything else too. So I think you have to consider a lot. You have to consider what they're willing to pay you versus what they're willing to pay some of these other guys because Brian Hartline's not going to get what a Brent Key or an Alex Golesh is even going to get, I don't think. I know he comes from Ohio State, but I think that these other proven head coaches are going to get a little bit. They might get an extra $3-4 million just because they've been able to prove it as a head coach. So I think that ultimately, to answer your question, you have to entertain the idea of possibly losing or leaving the team and then them going on and winning a national championship or competing for one. That's what you have to take on the chin to become a head coach. And that's just the sacrifice you have to make. It's going to look terrible. It's going to look awful, but you see what happened with Bo Prabula. He had to put out a really heartfelt message like, oh, I didn't really want to do this. This is not in my character to just quit on my team, especially when there's something bigger than me happening. But I got to do what's best for my career. And we look back and we say, well, Prabula, he might have been better than Drew Aller. If Coach Franklin and Drew Aller were holding him back, then yeah, he deserved to leave. And so the narrative just kind of switches. So if he goes to Penn State and turns them around, I don't think anybody's going to be looking at Hartline like, wow, you really quit on Ohio State. It's like, no, I had to do what I had to do. And I think that's kind of the name of the game is that, and I think that's what is going to happen in the future is that not only are these players in the transfer portal looking out for themselves, these coaches are going to have to do the same thing. And you're going to have to make some tough decisions and you're going to have to face your team in a team meeting like, hey guys, like I know that we got something big going on here, but I have no choice but to take this job. And if you were offered a $4, $5, $6 million raise, I don't think there's anybody in this locker room that wouldn't take it. I just happen to be the guy that's up for it. So I think that's my opinion on it. I think he has to entertain those not ideas. He has to entertain those offers because if they're real, then those offers are going to other guys too. And those phones are not going to stop moving until a deal gets done. Penn State, they got a big recruiting search ahead of them. Florida State, eventually when that job comes open, those are huge recruiting spots. And those are high school kids that are impatient and that are gonna follow the trend of everybody else. They're younger kids, they're very impressionable. So if guys start decommitting or guys start committing elsewhere or these other coaches start getting the ear of these recruits like, hey, that you don't know what type of coach is going to be there, you don't know who they're going to hire, but come here, something stable with some real coaching stability. And I think that game doesn't stop until you get your butt in the head coach's seat in that office and pick up the phone and let these recruits know that the environment and everything is going to change over here and we're going to trust you to follow that. And so I think he has to entertain it. I think it'd be irresponsible for him not to.
Yes, though, you have to entertain it. I don't know if he takes it or not. If you're Penn State, how big of an upgrade is Brian Hartline? In my opinion,
Not much. For namesake, but I think that it is important to know that you're bringing that mindset from Ohio State into the building of Penn State. And I think that can't be overstated.
they just did that with Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator. They just brought him in.
And here's the thing, it's all about a personality. I mean, Jim knows I don't know how old he is, but he might be double the age of Brian Hartline. Talking about the relatability of a head coach and what he's able to do, bringing his own guys into that staff. I think that it sets a different expectation and a different precedent when you get a guy that's going to be there long term, signs the deal, and then gets on his own recruiting trail and then gets into the ear of some of these guys who are considering Ohio State or possibly even committed. Because I think as much as guys want to play for Ryan Day, I think there's a lot of guys on that offense that are committing to Ohio State because of Brian Hartline. And that's the guy that they have to deal with and learn from day in and day out.
100%. He's notably, and Ben said, he's their best recruiter when
Mm-hmm.
it comes, especially to that offense, especially calling them wide receiver U. He is the guy. So that part I do love for him. I don't know how effective he's going to be. Now here's the thing: if he goes to Penn State, let's just say he does take that job and he's not going to call plays, I think it would work. If he's like, I'm going to call the plays, then I don't think it's going to work. But I do think that there are like the number one receiver in the country's committed to Ohio State. Like if he takes that job before signing day, like there's a great chance that flips over. Like Chris Henry, I think his name is. Like he could be like just I'm gonna go past him. I follow the guy who's produced all of these first round picks. It's not Ryan Day doing it. It's Brian Hartline. So uh, that's what I think. I don't know if like a year ago was Brian Hartline a head coaching candidate? No. So like could he have learned enough to be a head coaching candidate? In my head, no. Am I going to pay him $5 to $6 million a year and he hasn't proven that he can even like win a big game? Well, How's he hasn't played anybody yet? So I don't even know. And the team he played against, he had all offseason to prepare for in Texas and scored 14 points. So I'm not going to beat down on Brian Hartline. I'm just not going to be the first one to pay him 5, 6, 7, $8 million to be the head coach at my university. And I don't know what I'm getting other than a good recruiter. And I don't know what I'm getting besides a good receiver quarterback recruiter, which, by the way, Penn State hasn't been bad at either. They've gotten good quarterbacks and gotten good receivers in the past, and it hasn't worked.
Yeah. Let's flip over to Georgia versus Florida. Georgia Florida rivalry game played in Jacksonville every single year. Georgia is favored by 7.5 points. I wonder what this line would look like if they had to go to Gainesville, but fortunately for Georgia, they do not. Kirby Smart has dominated this game since he got the job in 2016. He's won 7 out of the 9 matchups and has won these games on an average of 21 points per game. Florida now with no coach. I don't know if that makes them play inspired football. DJ Lagway has been on a supreme roller coaster this year. 1 minute he looks like he could be the most talented quarterback in the country. The next, you never know. You just don't really know what you're going to get from him. Still can't really hit the middle game like you'd want. He could throw the deep ball all day long. We've seen plenty of SEC quarterbacks that can do that. But the layups, the easy stuff, the stuff that we talk about with Arch Manning, even Lenore Sellers, the same questions with him too. What do you think about this game? What do you think about Florida playing without Napier? Does it give them a bit of excitement? Does that close the door in their season of potentially being anything worth a damn? Like Georgia still has a lot what they're fighting for, a big or an SEC title appearance, getting that bye even. There's still a chance for them to do that. What do you expect of this game, and what do you think about 7.5?
Well, I like 7.5 a lot for Georgia.
Same.
I really do. I
Yeah.
think they have the better roster. They have the better players, top to bottom, better coach. Like that's really important. What wouldn't shock me though is if Florida came out, that offense looked pretty good. Like Brian Billy Napier being the head coach was also the play caller, and there were reports that he wouldn't even really do any of the game plan. He would just say, "Okay, that's the game plan. I'll call the plays from here." After being the head coach and having to do everything else the entire time, and so there is a chance where you've got a guy who's maybe chomping at the bit to call the plays because he knows he could call them better than Billy Napier because he prepared the game
It's a
plan.
good point.
And so you could see a game where Florida comes out and they are swinging. DJ Lagway all of a sudden looks like a guy who can play with some confidence because he believes in the play calls that are coming in. They're not just off the hand like, yeah, I just saw the play sheet the other day, so I'll probably be okay. So I think that there's going to be a level of professionalism on that offensive coordinator that I don't think we've seen so far from Florida. So it would not surprise me if they were able to get a couple on Georgia. However, I just the competitive culture that Georgia has, the way that they handle themselves, the way that it feels like every game starts the same. Other team gets up early, they weather the storm, they come back, they win, they cover. I don't know that Florida even has a good enough team to compete and make this game close. But I do think we start to see some flashes of what DJ Lively could be with confident play calling, and I think we happen to see what the ceiling could be for Georgia. I think this could be a good ceiling game for them. We saw them against Ole Miss, and that was a really exciting game. Let's not forget, like you said, Kirby Smart is off a bye. The team is healthy. They're rested. This feels like a low key a long bye. October 18th is the last time they played. November 1st is the first game they play. Feels like a long time. It's pretty normal, but it just feels extra. So there's something about this Georgia team I think is special. I think they realize it. I think they're basically going 4-0, 5-0 the rest of the way through from getting a playoff bye. I don't know that Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and then who's at four? Alabama
Yeah.
can consistently like play at the same level they're playing at. I happen to think Georgia can. So I think they're looking at this like take care of them. Mississippi State. We host Texas. We beat the brakes off of Texas. Go to Charlotte, kind of a bye week, I guess itself, and then finish at Georgia Tech. So to me, it feels like Kirby Smart has this team dialed in. This is definitely not one of his better teams. We know that, but I think they're much better than Florida at this point.
Yeah, you talk about Kirby Smart having Sarkisian's number. I think he outcoaches, outclasses Sarkisian every single time. I don't know what the reason is for that, but he just kind of owns Sarkisian. Now, as far as this game against Florida, it's definitely not one of those look ahead games because it's a rivalry. Florida's going to be playing with back against the wall mentality. If they even have the pride enough to play this way, some of the body language from DJ Lagway, some of the guys on the sidelines, if you see like highlights on Twitter and stuff, it just looks like maybe they were just ready for Napier to be gone. I don't know if that was the tune and everybody was kind of singing towards the end of his exit, but I think Georgia is playing for their respect. They're usually, when they're in this position with one loss, they usually are in the top three. And now they're sitting outside of the top five, and it's like, okay, like I don't think the AP and the nation respects us enough. I think that they're a scary matchup for anybody, and it's Georgia. So obviously it is, but I think now more than ever, and I think that people saw Tennessee score a lot of points on them, so they got a little like, oh, I don't know, the game could have been a fluke win for all we know with Tennessee missing that field goal, like I said earlier. But I think this team is owed a little bit more respect. I think Gunnar Stockton might have earned a little bit more respect than I think coming into this season. So do I think that he's been a better quarterback than Carson Beck? I don't know. I think he's got better talent around him. Receivers aren't dropping the ball as much. I think he's got a way better run game than Georgia had in the past. And I think that's what carries them. Nate Frazier, all those guys in the backfield, they can just rotate and keep going and pounding and pounding and pounding against Florida. I don't know if this game gets ugly, but I could see a score where it's 33-20 or a 31-17, 31-20, and Georgia covers by up 2 possessions or like a possession and a half or something like that.
I can see that as well. I can also see this being a game where Florida just runs out of tricks. Like you only have so many go-to trick plays are also off a bye. Where like we're gonna deep shot, we'll double reverse, we're gonna do a whatever wheel route from the backfield, whatever it is. I think you see a couple of those plays, those little gadget plays, and we see a competitive first, maybe second quarter. I just think that like if you haven't been a play caller before, and I'm not sure who the interim play caller is for Florida right now, but I don't know that I believe in them over what Kirby Smart is able to do, even just after halftime. So I'll take Georgia comfortably. What is it, 6.5?
7.
7. I'll take Georgia. I would take them -10 at this point, honestly. So I'll take them to cover as well.
Let's jump into our last game that we are going to cover, and that is South Carolina at Ole Miss. Ole Miss with a 12.5-point spread. This line confuses me only because of the way that South Carolina just played Alabama. If that game hadn't gone the way it's gone, then I would say Ole Miss, they played down to their competition, but also have the ability to play up to it, as you saw against Georgia and other games in the past. But we saw them play against Washington State, and so them playing down to their competition is a real thing. I happen to believe that Ole Miss, quote-unquote, plays down to their competition this weekend, and my thing is this. I keep going back to the Washington State game. I feel like Ole Miss is past that. They're better than that. They're a better version of themselves since that game. But we sat and wondered what a superior athlete at quarterback would do to this defense. And Lenore Sellers might be the best athlete at the quarterback position in the country. And I think that the design runs, him being able to run between the tackles and being able to balance out that offensive attack, I think it could cause some fits for the Ole Miss defense. And I really do think that there's a chance that South Carolina can keep this game really close in the first half. And that 12.5 starts to feel like a long shot heading into the fourth quarter when it's a 3 or 4 point game. And you're basically banking on Ole Miss scoring a touchdown late and then South Carolina turning the ball over and then they win by 13 points. But if the game's 31-20, then it means South Carolina's going to cover. If it's 31-28, 31-26, 31-27, which I think this game has a chance to be in, then South Carolina's going to cover. I don't see Lenore Sellers letting this game get out of hand unless he just gets blitzed a bunch. Talking about Keywan Lacey, he breaks out on a screen or he breaks out a big run. I just don't think Ole Miss's offense, we talk about them playing down the competition, I'll keep repeating that. I think this is one of those games where Ole Miss is kind of looking ahead, like, okay, we got ourselves back on track into this playoff push, and we go to Atlanta for this SEC championship game. But South Carolina, I just feel like there's enough spirit to be had for South Carolina to say, you know what, we're not gonna go out this sad. Lenore Sellers, who could very well end up in the draft next year, I think he wants to end his season on a high note. He's got a lot that he's playing for and stuff to put on tape. So I do think South Carolina actually covers this spread. I don't think that they win, but I'm definitely going to put my money down for South Carolina to cover this 12 and a half.
Okay, and I don't mind that at all. I think that that's probably the smarter, maybe safer play at this point. Here are the things that I think make this line a little bit larger than it could be. One is Oklahoma came to South Carolina and won 26 to 7. And then we just saw Ole Miss completely outclass Oklahoma on the road at Oklahoma's place. So I think that's number one is Ole Miss is clearly a superior team to Oklahoma, and South Carolina was clearly inferior to Oklahoma. So that to me is like, okay. And Oklahoma won 26 to 7. That's 19 points. That would cover this game as well. That's number one. The second thing, the reason I think that this game gets a little weird for South Carolina as far as the spread goes is they're not very good on the road. So they played Virginia Tech was one of their first game of the season.
That was in
So
Atlanta. Yeah.
that wasn't really a home game. Then they had Vanderbilt came and just beat them down, but then they went to Mizzou and they lost by 9, and then they went to LSU and lost by 10. So we're talking about a 9.5 point like deficit as far as points scored needing to win. It's not a stretch to me to think that Ole Miss couldn't score 3 more points than LSU did against South Carolina, or that LSU or Ole Miss couldn't outscore Mizzou's 29 points to South Carolina's 20. So I look at this game like, yeah, Ole Miss can play down to their competition. I also look at it like this could be a Ole Miss team that clearly sees that they have the chance to run the table. They have this game, they have Citadel,
Mhm.
Florida, and then Mississippi State. So those are all four of these remaining games are very winnable for them. And so I look at this as I'm sure they look at it as an opportunity to really like stamp and say, okay, we're gonna play our level of ball because what's in front of us is a playoff berth. But not only that, an SEC championship berth potentially. Not only that, maybe a national championship is on the line every single week. I happen to think Lane Kiffin and the way he's been talking about making changes and maybe leaving, but maybe not leaving because he's not going to leave for the money. I
Right.
think there's a lot to be said there. I also think Ole Miss is going to show up. They play South Carolina obviously at home, Citadel at home, and they play Florida at home, and they go on the road to Mississippi State to finish the year out, which I don't know that's going to be a competitive game at all. And so I think that home crowd is going to be a ruckus. I think it's going to be electric there. I think Trinidad Chambliss plays some of his better football, which he has been playing better and better. He could easily end up in the Heisman race. He's like
Mhm.
third or maybe he's like fifth, I think, in passing yards in the SEC. He didn't play the first 2 games. So, like, there's just, to me, a lot of momentum for Ole Miss. I don't know that South Carolina on the road is going to be able to put together enough stops or turnovers or special team scores to keep this game competitive. So I look at this one as being a quick Ole Miss gets up 17, and we're kind of sitting there like, man, 6 o'clock at night. This is kind of a boring game to watch.
And I'm not going to disagree with that. Ole Miss is a team that, like you said, they are riding a hot hand, and then what they have the rest of the season is very inspiring in the fact that we can get to we can get to Atlanta for this SEC championship game and be sitting very comfortably with where we want to be. They could very well end up back in the top 3 or 4, depending on what happens in the SEC. I don't see Ohio State taking a dip. For that same exact reason, I don't think Indiana is going to take a dip, but those two teams have to play in their conference championship games too. And so somebody that plays in these conference championships that's going to lose is going to remain in that top 4. And I could see a chance, or I could see a thing where Indiana or Ohio State beats the crap out of Indiana, and then Indiana falls outside of that top 4, and then it leaves the second place SEC team to get into that number 4 spot, just depending on how the chips fall. Texas Tech could very well much run the table and get that last spot too by uh, winning out the rest of their games and getting into that Big 12 championship and winning soundly. So I think it's a very interesting matchup this week. But for Ole Miss going forward, I think they have a lot to play for. Obviously, Lane Kiffin has been at the top of every single coaching carousel video and news story. So I don't see him being distracted, but I do see a way where Lane Kiffin is not distracted, because that's not the word, but he can't help himself but consider some of these offers that are being thrown his way, because we're talking close to $100 million. He could be, would he be the first $100 million coach? Because I'm sure
He'd be up there. I think Jimbo Fisher had the largest
that's
base
right.
ever,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure
And so I think there's a possibility for that. That's money that you not necessarily can turn down. That's kind of weird to say as a coach that's already making like 80 million bucks, but I think this team is focused. I think Trinidad Chambliss has taken the reins of this offense and has done a good job of it, and with not giving that spot back. So I really like what Ole Miss is doing, but I think I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to keep my pick, and I'm going to go South Carolina to cover this 12.5. But I wouldn't be surprised if I lose out on this one at all.
Yeah, and this would be one where I like Ole Miss. I think you and I have you called out Trinidad Chambliss being a threat early, like his first game. He was very elite, and we've kind of just been riding Ole Miss. And we got to watch him in person, and we were like, we really weren't impressed at all.
Right.
Kirby Smart has the largest contract, by the way. He signed last year at 130 million,
Jeez.
10-year 130, which I mean he brought him back, so I get that. Mark has to get it done.
He earned that, though.
He definitely did. He definitely has. But I just look at Ole Miss like, let me say this. Something about Lane Kiffin has always screamed like unserious, and that's just his personality is very much like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much.
He's a frat guy that's like in his 40s. Yeah.
That just happens to be he's single, like he wasn't with his daughter, who knows what. So like there's just a lot of he's always having fun with different players and whatnot. He's on Twitter stirring the pot consistently. Call Brian Kelly fat. Is that what you call it? Or
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he called him fat, which is now he's unemployed, so probably a low shot. But it's just something about him screams unserious. But this season feels like they're dialed in. Last season, with all the money they spent, Jackson Dart was there. It was like, okay, we're gonna be a serious team.
Felt more like a circus. Yeah.
Yeah, but now this year it feels like he and everyone on the staff kind of understands like we got something to play for. We got something that we could really lose. We got to go out here and like attack. And so I just think that they're headed in the right direction. I think they have a quarterback that I don't know that I trust anybody else. Ty Simpson's up there. Maybe he's number two. As far as if I need a touchdown, who do I want to have the ball? Trinidad Chambliss has been just elite all year, and even his bad football games, with the Bucks, where you're like, yeah, he produced everything you needed to do. Even against
Mm.
Washington State at the end of the game, they needed scored 25-yard scramble touchdown. Even went through the dead. So I trust him. I trust Lane. I don't trust anything about South Carolina at all. And then you add on them being on the road. I think it's good. No, I think it's an ugly game.
Great point. So that'll wrap up our Week 10 Best Bets episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. Leave comments, subscribe, and like the page. Also, check us out on TikTok. We are blowing up over there. We got a lot more motion over there than we do here. I wish that was different, but it is what it is. But this has been fun. College football season is wrapping up quicker than we know it. It's already November, or it's coming up on the November weekend. But we're hoping that the end of the season is great. We get to a good playoffs and have a good ending to the season. But these bets don't stop. So tune into us. We know what we're talking about. We're going to win you some money. And you guys have a good day and enjoy this weekend. It's First and Cam. We are out.